Welcome to Saturday Stories, the series where I share a memory that I have about a past trip. Today's story starts the moment we landed in Iceland. Our apartment check-in wasn't until after 3 in the afternoon. It was dark 30 in the morning, so instead of sitting around, we grabbed a rental car and headed straight out for the coast. It was snowing. It was my first time seeing snow since I can remember, and my sister and nieces fell asleep almost immediately as soon as they hit the back seat. Her husband was desperately in need of a nap too, so when we reached the parking lot, it was lights out for them. They were out cold. I was the only one awake. I was restless, curious, and bored. I stepped out into Iceland alone. The first thing I noticed wasn't the sand or even the cliffs. It was warning signs, harsh and blunt. They warned about the waves being unpredictable and violent and deadly. The signs didn't sugarcoat it. They basically said if you get pulled out in the freezing water, nobody is going to come and save you. With my whole family asleep in the car behind me, you know those intrusive thoughts were talking. If I got sucked out into that beach water, nobody was going to know. But who cares? I was careful, and I stepped out onto that sand. This beach was very different from anything in Florida. Our beaches are covered in soft white sand, half of it imported to fight erosion. The water in Florida laps more than it crashes, but here the sand crunched under my shoes. Tiny pieces of cooled lava instead of shells. Waves roared with a kind of anger I'd never experienced before. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. I ran my hands along the sheer rock faces, listened to the crash of the ocean, and smelled that mix of salt, cold air, and faint smoky scent that seemed to come straight from the earth itself. This beach was alive in a way that our beaches back home just aren't. When you stand on the beach and look out towards the sea stacks, they don't just look like rocks. They look like figures, frozen mid-struggle. And according to Icelandic legend, they are. The story goes that long ago, 3 trolls tried to drag a ship ashore under the cover of night. They pulled and they pulled against the waves, but they were too slow. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight touched them, and trolls, as anyone who's ever read The Hobbit knows, cannot survive the sun. The light froze them where they stood, and so they remained, still reaching out to the ocean in stone. After some time on the beach, I started walking back towards the car to check on the fam. They were still asleep, so I kept looking around. I spotted a wide field of moss. Forbidden territory, clearly marked with ropes and tons of signs that say don't walk on it. And everywhere caught in the moss were hats. So many hats. Blown off heads, gone forever, trapped in the forbidden lands. I got a little obsessed with the hats, but that's beside the point. I didn't get why people just didn't go get the hats. But then I learned that the moss that covers the rocks there is decades old, even centuries. And it takes just as long to grow back once it's crushed. One misplaced boot can scar the landscape forever. So the hats stay where the wind takes them. A kind of unconventional offering. Better to lose a glove or a beanie than to destroy something that's been there long before you were born. Eventually, I wandered towards the café. Outside sat a skull of some kind of animal. I couldn't tell what, but I remember thinking I'd love to have a skull to put outside my house. I bet the solar salesman would never knock again. Inside, another sign caught my attention. If you weren't a paying customer, it cost 200 is to go pee. So fine, I bought a sandwich and a drink, then used the bathroom, and then went back outside to check on the fam. They were still asleep. Go figure. And now I'm bored. And I remembered seeing a church and a cemetery on the way in. So I decided to walk. Up the hill through the cold to that quiet little graveyard. I wandered there for a while, taking in the peace of it, wondered about the history of it, looked at the headstones. Couldn't understand anything that they said, but I took in the view that these past residents enjoyed. Later, I learned that the small white church with the bright red roof was built in 1934, simple and sturdy. the kind of place that belongs to both the landscape and the people. From its hilltop, the church looks out across the Atlantic Ocean, its steeple standing guard over the town below. Beneath the glacier lies Katla, one of Iceland's most dangerous volcanoes. If Katla erupts, the ice would melt in an instant. Flood waters would roar down through the valley and towards the village of Vik. The church stands as a refuge. The hill is high enough to keep the townspeople safe from the water. After a while, I got to thinking that the fam might be awake and by now would be wondering where I went. Maybe they would think that I got swept out to sea. So I headed back to check on my family. And guess what? They were still asleep. So I went back to the beach. Eventually, my nieces woke up, and I played on the beach with them, keeping them away from the waves, making sure they didn't get too close to the swallowing ocean. A little while later, my sister dragged herself out of the car, and then her husband, and just like that, it was time to leave. I felt like I'd lived an entire Icelandic day before they even opened their eyes. And in a way I had. I touched the sand, smelled the air, counted lost hats, explored a cemetery, and stood face to face with waves that reminded me just how small I really am. They may have slept through it, but I'll never forget it. Thanks for listening to me talk to myself. If you like the content, press like. If you want more, subscribe. And remember to wander often, wonder always, and be safe on those back roads.